I would like to give the stage to our special guest, David. Now,
I spent the last 13 and change years working inside agencies as not client facing, but helping to market the agency itself. So I did some marketing, some biz dev, and learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work from trying a lot of it. So um, when I say, why most agency growth advice fails, it's because I've heard a lot of that advice and I've tried a lot of it. And sometimes advice works and sometimes it doesn't. And it took me some time to figure out what, like why that is. And so that's basically what I'm going to be unpacking today is why I've found that happens. So um, on that note, here's kind of where I'd like to cover today. So first, I'm going to kind of unpack the advice that a lot of us have heard, that I've heard, and kind of diagnose why it doesn't work. Then we'll get into kind of the often invisible role that positioning plays in agency growth effectiveness. Um, then I'll show you my four-part framework that I've developed that I've found works best. Then I'm going to share some examples of that framework in action so you can kind of wrap your heads around it, kind of see how it might apply in your situation. And then also provide a very actionable strategy at the end for those of you that maybe are looking to try to speed up your customer acquisition in the near term. I know a lot of times agencies, if they're in a pinch, it's like, well, we don't need leads 9 months from now. We need them next month. So I'll share that at the end. And then after that, I can open it up for questions and we can go from there. So sweet. So really where I wanted to start is to not just kind of list off things that I've heard, but hear things from you guys as well. So I'd love it if in the comments, if you'd be willing to share some of the advice that you've heard from blogs, from, social media influencers, whatever it is. What's some of the advice that you've heard from other people? Just realizing I'm not seeing the
guys, you can write in the comments that what kind of advices you hear the most.
stuff pulled together, but I'm happy to. I'd love to hear, specifics if people have some advice that they've heard before that they've tried.
Okay,
Yeah,
build a
build a
personal
personal
brand.
brand. That's a pretty popular one. I've heard that. Yep, client referrals. That's pretty classic. Just do good work and you'll get referrals, and that's how you grow. I'll just kind of show you some of the ones that I've heard before. There's the do great work and clients will come. That's kind of that client referral one. Post daily on LinkedIn. That's that personal brand one coming up again. You hear two variations on the third one here. Cold email is dead, or cold email is all you need. Depending on who you're hearing it from. You have people talking about, oh, you need to productize, or oh, you just need to hire a salesperson, or make sure you're saying yes to everything. Don't be telling people no. Pick a niche is another popular one. If you just have a great website, that'll bring leads, or make sure you're joining more communities. That's where you're going to get new business. Or in the last one, your work speaks for itself. That's kind of related to that very first one. So I don't know. I'm sure many of you have probably tried some variation of one of these, if not more. And I'd love to hear, maybe put a 1 in the chat if you've heard one of these, and maybe a 2 if you've tried one and it didn't work like you hoped.
Have comments. Personal relationships are more important than mass emails. Provide some guarantees.
These are all good things. And that's the thing is, we'll get into this later, but the main issue is, I think, when they're done with the wrong foundation. So, but we'll touch on that here in a minute. So I'm just going to highlight here kind of why I think and why I've seen these not work. So, with the do great work and clients will come. Referrals can be inconsistent. you're basically putting your growth in the hands of your audience or your clients rather than having some sort of proactive tool that you have personally to be able to go and move that lever. Things like posting daily on LinkedIn. If somebody just has that piece of advice, but they don't have clear positioning, they're just going to be posting all sorts of things, and it's going to create more noise. It's not going to drive leads. You can read through the rest of those. I'm not going to go through every single one. Yeah, you can kind of see kind of the range of questions that a lot of people, or the range of advice that people will hear, and kind of why I don't think it works. And why is that? So basically, what I've learned is that, um, all the marketing tactics in the world, whether it's build a personal brand, wait for referrals, improve your website, add guarantees, things like that. Tactics don't matter unless you have market relevance. And basically, unless your audience looks at what you provide. What do I mean by tactics don't equal relevance? What I mean is that a lot of tactics it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. It's not really a deliberate strategy. It's just trying to pick and choose random things that sound good independently and just do them and see if they work. So I've asked myself, why is it that we over-index on these tactics? I have some theories. My biggest theory is that it's a holdover from a lot of the SaaS world. There's a lot of tools out there, and when you have a tool, it's in their best interest to try to explain how their tool should be at the center of your workflow. So they might publish tons of content saying, okay, well, if you just use our tool, then you'll get easy results. All your business problems will be solved. Problem is that, it could work, but it's not likely to work unless you have the fundamentals in place. So what should you do instead? In my experience, there is some really foundational work. Okay, awesome, Corlin. Thank you. So what do you do instead? In my experience, there's some really foundational work that every agency founder needs to do. And that is positioning, or market positioning, as some people call it. How many of you have heard somebody talk about positioning? Or is this kind of more of an unfamiliar term or unfamiliar concept? I'm happy to unpack it, but I'm curious if others have heard people mention positioning before.
I'll jump in. I always like a good participation trophy. Hi,
Yeah.
sorry, I joined a little bit late. Definitely have heard positioning before, but I always like hearing different perspectives on it because I feel like it's so easy to be like, position yourself in the market, like differentiators, But like, okay, like what does that actually mean? Like, how do you execute it, So I'm down for a deep dive.
Cool. Well, we'll get into more of that. And if there's anything that I don't cover, we can also circle back to that during the Q&A too. So, but I'll just kind of give my description. So I'd say that it's basically the work of understanding, figuring out who you help best based off of your strengths, what specific problems that you solve best, why someone should pick you instead of a bunch of other sort of look-alike type agencies. It typically involves narrowing your focus so you can really sharpen your message so it's super clear, super compelling, and something that you bake into your website, your services, your pitch, just so it really resonates on multiple levels with the types of clients you want more of. A lot of times what I've seen in a lot of agencies is you start out maybe kind of as more of a freelancer and you can provide your services to a range of different folks. So you build a portfolio of folks across multiple industries. And then when it comes to going and marketing yourself, you just say that you do one thing for a bunch of different people, and that makes you blend in with everyone. And it basically means you have competition with everyone as well. So market positioning does is, you're picking a lane where you do your best work Usually it's centered around your best fit clients that you've done prior work with, where you can lead with that, like those examples of your prior work, and then building the rest of your marketing on that. That means, updating your homepage, updating how you're talking on social, um, how your sales calls go, all those sorts of things. And essentially positioning is that foundational work that all the rest of your marketing hinges on. If you don't have clear positioning, the rest of your marketing is likely to fail. So, if I had to say the one reason why most agency growth advice fails, it's that it's built on really poor positioning, and it's positioning that there's kind of a gravitational pull in most agencies towards more generic positioning. So you have to actively push against it. But I guess the shortest way to say what positioning is that it's making sure you have something worth saying, not just picking a place to, a place to say something, or, choosing a particular tool for how you're going to say something. Here's a good visual that I think might help kind of show a little bit better. Broad positioning, or like default positioning, really makes you a small fish in a big pond. You're competing with a lot of lookalike folks. And when consumers are trying to find a solution for their problem, there's a whole bunch of folks also marketing to them because it's broad. But if you do the work of focusing your positioning, you essentially are picking a smaller pond where you can be a big fish because of your strengths. So essentially you're intentionally choosing a focus where you can credibly convince those in that market that you're the natural choice based off prior work that you've done, the results that you drove, that sort of thing. This is a good point for me to kind of tell a story from one of the first agencies I was hired to work in. We had 3 different ideal client profiles, which is ironic. If there's 3 of them, it's probably not ideal, but nonetheless, there's 3 different client types that they wanted to target. It was lead gen, e-commerce, and subscriptions. And they were all in on doing content marketing. They were very convinced on that. And so the thing we did first is we tried to figure out, okay, well, what problems do all 3 of those verticals have in common? And we published some content around that. And it didn't resonate with any of them. It was too generic. It was too broad. And so it fell flat. So we were thinking, okay, well, how do we make stuff that does resonate, that does bring in leads? And so we thought, well, maybe if we write focused content for each one of those. So we did that. We wrote something specifically for the lead gen crowd, specifically for the e-com crowd, and specifically for the subscription audience. And that worked much better. Problem was, it took 3 times as long and 3 times the amount of resources to do it for 3 different ideal clients. And we had limited resources. So it took us into this decision-making place where we had to pick a lane because just based off of limitations and resources. And we ended up leaning into the e-commerce niche because we had the most positive stories from prior work there. And there's a lot of other factors that went into it. But at the end of the day, that allowed us to go back to that content, be much more focused moving forward. And at the end of the day, we had better lead quality, better traffic, better qualified conversations, and deals that ended up coming in. And ironically, actually, we ended up seeing an uptick in some of those other verticals of people coming from those verticals as well. And that's maybe a topic for another time, but essentially specializing in one area can create a halo effect where if other people see that you go deep in this one particular area and you have a lot of expertise, you'll get people reaching out saying, hey, I know you focus on this one vertical, but would what you do work for us as well? And there's no reason that you can't say yes to some of those people. I would just say, don't let saying yes to clients outside of your ideal client or outside of your positioning change how you position yourself and how you present yourself in the market. So that story, it really highlights a key lesson. It's that relevance is really the key to attention. Like when we started posting that more specific, focused content, we got more people's attention. It also translates to more credibility, translates to more trust. And you need all those things in order to bring in new leads. So I took that lesson, grounded in my experience, and that became the foundation for my 4-part framework for agency growth. So without further ado, I'll hop into that. So the 4 pillars of my framework are positioning, which we've covered some already, building on that with publishing, building on that with productization, and then finally adding in partnerships. Hope all of these, are somewhat straightforward and speak for themselves, but I'll unpack them just to make sure. So, we've already talked about this a little bit. This is really dialing in who you do your best work for, the problems you solve. I guess one thing I do want to qualify at this stage is that if you're very early stage in your agency and you haven't worked with very many clients, it's probably going to be premature to know your positioning because you don't know who you do your best work for. So I would say in the early stages, when you're just leaning on your network and other channels, it's great to build a portfolio of a range of folks. But hopefully what that experience is telling you, or what you're able to glean from that, is that maybe the work you enjoy the most, that has the best margins, the people you click with the best, basically that you enjoy working holistically with, you're going to be able to discern that by, in those early stages. And that gives you the insight that you need to narrow your positioning so that you're prepared for more accelerated growth, more focus, and build from there. So yeah, essentially positioning is that work where, you're defining that reason that someone chooses you and not someone else. You're focusing, you're trying to make your business the more obvious choice for the right fit people, your best fit clients. And it's really kind of helping to craft that story that people will tell about you when you're not in the room. It's that sort of shorthand mental shortcut that your ideal buyer can use to understand your value, or quite frankly, that your partners can use to help convey your value. That's another important one. And then really it's the thing that makes your offer make sense. The next part of the next pillar is publishing. This is really fundamentally how you're putting yourself out there. How does your what you do best and for whom, how does that translate into putting yourself into the world? You could reposition your agency, but if you're not putting yourself out there, then nobody, who cares? Like nobody can see it. So it's publishing is essential to actually notifying the world that that you do what you do and that you do it well. So you can see there, it makes your expertise visible. It's how you show up when someone's ready to buy, especially publishing consistently over time. It builds trust because people can see over time. It's like, oh, they have a lot of expertise and they're showing it consistently. Again, it's like your proof of relevance. If you're trying to publish regularly, but you don't have that positioning piece in place, then it's not going to show relevance. It's going to show that you kind of hop all over the place. Whereas if you have that strong positioning, then every bit of publishing that you do after that, it is just furthering your credibility and your depth in that one particular area. So it's super important, but it has to be built on that foundation of positioning. Next is productization. And this is really just structuring your offerings in basically to your newly defined ICP, or to align with your new positioning, so that you have maybe a fixed scope intro offer, something that if people want to just see what it's like to work with you, and then if they want to build on that and they want to work with you on a more consistent ongoing basis, they can do that. So I know a lot of agencies, they'll provide custom offerings, and there's still a place for that, but I would say what's best to do is to have an intro offer, have a like a recurring offer with that is fixed in scope, and then have a premium offer, which is your more custom offering. So it positions your custom work as more of a high ticket item, which helps your margins and revenue, and by productizing the stuff that's comes before that it allows you to introduce a lot more efficiencies, because you're doing similar things over and over again. The other thing it does is, especially when you're building this on new positioning, it makes your services easier to buy, easier to sell, especially if you're tailoring it to that new focus area. So, before there might be ambiguity about what you do, who you do it for, how it, the outcomes that it provides. Productization can help remove a lot of that ambiguity. And really, a lot of times it's providing a lot of the clarity that a lot of SaaS products do provide around pricing and what you're going to get and what the outcomes are, that sort of thing. And then after that, we have partnerships. So when you have your positioning dialed in, you're publishing, you've productized, you now have essentially thought leadership, some credibility that you can go to adjacent potential partners and showcase your expertise, and have that sort of intro offer, that initial way that somebody could engage with you, to see what it's like to work with you. So you're reducing the friction to getting a new business. And partnerships in general, just like referrals, they come with some built-in credibility and trust from the person who's referring. And so that momentum, combined with the simplicity of your offer and your expertise being demonstrated through your content, is just a great way it's like a perfect storm of good forces to help drive good quality leads for you. So I wanted to kind of unpack what this looks like, might look like in action. So, let's say you have a dev shop and you're going to reposition around just serving local government. So that might look like, you stop pitching everyone and you decide, okay, we're just going to help municipal departments modernize their outdated tools. How that might look for their publishing is, okay, we're going to write case studies and practical guides on how local governments can upgrade legacy systems without disruption. So it's putting yourself out there, but it's demonstrating specialized expertise, which is what's going to stand out to them. On the productization front, might look like, some sort of modernization starter, thing where it's like a fixed scope. It's only 90 days. Something that's maybe below a particular threshold, so it's easier for government buyers to approve, maybe get underneath that RFP threshold that they might have. And then on the partnership side of things, maybe you're building relationships with civic tech nonprofits or procurement advisors who will regularly send warm leads. So I hope that's helpful in making it a little more concrete. Have one more example as well. So, and that's, say you start as an email marketing expert, and over time you realize, e-com is kind of my best vertical. Maybe you're a Klaviyo expert, but now basically you could reposition to being, the retention revenue partner for 7-figure sustainable e-com brands. What that might look like on the publishing side is, posting more breakdowns of other people's email sequences, things like that, posting revenue benchmarks specifically for brands in those verticals that they're aiming for. So maybe like clean beauty, food, lifestyle, that sort of thing. They might create a retention quick start package with welcome, abandon, post-purchase flows, basically something where somebody could buy a fixed scope engagement upfront, and if everything goes well, then they can build on that. But it's a good sort of kick the tires, take our services for a test drive sort of offer. And then lastly, partnerships. The co-market with Shopify, dev shops, and UGC creators serving the same types of brands. So I hope that's making sense. If anyone has any questions, feel free to hop in now, or we're pretty close to the end, and so you'll be able to ask some questions then too. But the other question that comes up is, but what if I need leads right now? So you're like, yes, I'm convinced that I need to work on my positioning, and I want to apply this framework of positioning, publishing, productization, and partnerships. But what about next month? And I've had this question from a lot of people. I've especially clients of mine, and I've kind of coined this term, Scrappy GTM, or Scrappy go-to-market. This is essentially, how can you, if you've at least done the positioning work, how can you start with a really simple funnel that's likely to drive more immediate results in the near term, and that you can build the rest of your marketing around. And what that is figure out your positioning, get one either landing page or homepage. If you have a small agency, it can be your homepage. If you're a more established agency that's still trying to figure out the specific repositioning you want to do, I would build a landing page that has all of your new positioning stuff that you're wanting to test, and start with that. Link to that in your LinkedIn profile, put it in your signature. Basically focus on that heavily in places where people see you. I'd update your LinkedIn social profile to reflect that new positioning. And then what I'd start doing is I would reach out to your ideal clients on LinkedIn, and I'd invite them to come either on an interview podcast or invite them to contribute to a research report. People like to talk about themselves, and if you can give them an opportunity to speak about their wisdom, their experience, you're creating content on one hand, you're having lengthy conversations with your ideal clients. Here, I'll broke it down here a little bit. You're having lengthy, warm conversations with your ideal clients about their pain points. You can really quickly iterate on your positioning and messaging. So if you have conversations with these folks that you think are your ideal fit clients based on your positioning, you can narrow things down. You can adjust your messaging based off of the things you're hearing directly from the market. And then finally, like if you're doing these at a consistent clip, you'll actually have a percentage of your guests that, because they've looked at your LinkedIn profile after you invited them, things like that, or they decide to go to your website, they'll say, hey, thanks for having me on. By the way, can you tell me a little bit more about what you do? And, you just talked with them for a significant amount of time, gotten to know them, and it's going to be a much easier sales conversation at that point. I've had that happen for me. I run a show, and it's a lot easier than you think. So that's kind of the scrappy go-to-market strategy that I recommend to a lot of folks right out the gate, and that you can build upon from there. So as far as the bottom line for everything I'm saying today, haphazard tactics are not going to work. If you don't have that thread, that foundation of strong positioning around what you do best, you know, doing cold outbound, doing social media posting, whatever it is, those tactics, they're just not going to work. You need to have a deliberate strategy built on a foundation of what you do best. So with that, that's it for the presentation. Any questions from the attendees, from the folks here?
Thank you very much for the presentation, David. Here I see one question from Brianna. When you're positioning, niching your agency portfolio, is it better to only feature 2 or 3 clients in the best fit vertical, or should you still include additional case studies in other verticals and can relate back to that vertical?
So when you reposition, there's basically, I would say there's low risk, mid risk, and high risk. Low risk is, kind of just being a little more focused around who you already serve. I feel like there's kind of low risk, low reward. So there's not as much of an upside with that approach. I would advise a lot more agencies to go with kind of the middle risk one, which is looking at who you do your best work for, looking for the pattern. So if the pattern is a consistent client type or vertical, I think that's always a great place to narrow down around. Part of the reason I justify that is that I would say if you can find online communities or conferences where that market or that ideal fit client congregates, then you've narrowed down and you've positioned around a good spot. If it's one of those, if you've positioned around like a pain point that a lot of people in a lot of different verticals have, it's going to be a lot harder to market yourself because you're going to say, well, should we go to this conference or this conference or this conference? Like they're all over the place. Use the example of the email marketing agency for e-com. Based off of that, that you can go and find some e-commerce conferences or find some e-commerce communities online and be speaking specifically to their kind of deeply felt pain points. Does that answer your question, Brianna? Sorry if I...
No, I mean, it was... No, it's okay. I definitely also go on tangents. It was definitely helpful. Thank you.
Awesome.
Grab one more if no one else has a question. First of all, great presentation. Thank you so much. At that point, I was taking some screenshots and some notes. I one more question when it comes to publishing. You mentioned like a direct LinkedIn outreach strategy for having those direct conversations, what I thought was a super good idea. Do you have any favorite publishing strategies when it comes to especially let's say an agency that's been in business for 4 years and has been doing everything through Upwork and Gig Radar, but doesn't, I don't really do a lot of publishing. So fresh out the gate, what would be your number one, you should start with this?
Well, that's where I would go back to the show or the podcast. So just to kind of tell you what I do and what's worked for me, I use a tool called StreamYard, and I interview people who are of my target market. So I primarily work with software development agencies. And so I regularly am reaching out to people who run software development agencies saying, hey, would you like to come on my show? Here's what it's about. Here's some of the other guests that we've had on. We record it on StreamYard. It's not broadcast live initially. And that's where we have, probably 45-minute conversation. And that turns into I can take that recording. I can create social media clips from it. So I can be posting consistently on my LinkedIn profile with clips from recent guests. So that helps with publishing, but it's really low lift because I can use different tools to help generate those clips really quickly. You can also use AI and things like that to handle the transcriptions and the descriptions from that conversation. So you can start publishing blog content that really is just like kind of summaries of your interviews. And honestly, like I didn't mention this in the presentation, but the other added benefit of doing these sort of podcast interviews at a regular cadence is that you just learn so much directly from the market. You're learning things about how to fine tune your copy on your site because of the language that your audience is using, things like that. So, yeah, I'd say start with a podcast or a show. Oh, the other thing is that after you've recorded it, not live, you can still schedule it to be broadcast live. So, you could do your first 5 and nobody even knows that it's going on. And then you could just start dripping them out a week apart from each other. And that way you could do 3 recordings one week, you could do none. But as long as you have that backlog, you'll have a steady stream of shows that are going live once a week that are helping you stay on your audience's radar. And I've had people reach out to me from that too, where they say, "Oh, I saw your interview with so and so, and I wanted to learn more about what you do." So that kind of goes back to that kind of scrappy go-to-market strategy that I mentioned near the end.
Great. Thank you so much. It does. Yeah. And I think it's almost like free market research, which is like really appealing and interesting to me as well. And it's one of those things where I'm like, am I going to be a podcast bro and start a podcast? But there's definitely like a lot of benefit for lead gen there, it sounds like.
Yeah. The thing is I think there's a lot of people who mentally there's a hurdle around, I have to have this really super fancy, polished, podcast, and it has to be on not Shopify, on Spotify and have, cool bumpers on either end. You really don't. Like if your main broadcast channel is LinkedIn, like you can take the raw recordings and you can put them on YouTube as, to add to your library there, and you can broadcast them as is on LinkedIn. One of the things that I recommend is get going and then get good. I think there's a lot of propensity to, okay, I have to have it be perfect before we put it out there. But I think just doing it and doing it while it's still a little bit messy is okay. Because you're going to learn a lot just from doing it, and you can polish it over time. The other example I like to use is, if you went to like the big YouTubers channels and you went back to like their very first video, I think they would probably cringe. But I mean, that goes to show that your most polished, final product, it evolves over time, and it's going to be a little messy and ugly initially, but you just gotta do it.
Thank you. Yeah. Massive imperfect action is what I keep trying to remind myself. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Here we have one more question. If you had to start an agency from scratch on your own, how do you approach it? Any tips for us?
A lot of it would come down to like what I know I do well. And I think a lot of times starting an agency from scratch is really starting out as a freelancer, somebody who like you've realized, okay, I do content well, or, oh, I do, I'm trying to think of good, email marketing well, something like that. And then just trying to build your network and do good work so that you get more referrals up front. I know I kind of poo-pooed on referrals initially, and it's not that referrals themselves are bad. It's that it's a bad strategy to depend the entire growth of your agency on. They're good things to have as part of like a variety of places that leads are coming from or that your growth is coming from. And so I would say, start with freelancing, figure out who your best fit clients are. Basically an agency is, it's a freelancer that's kind of moved up to the next level where they're maybe employing somebody. they're delegating some of what they do to another person. So I would say really kind of if you can figure out who your best fit clients are, try to streamline the value that you can provide into some sort of productized initial offer. I think that's going to be the easiest way to help get more conversions. If everything's custom, you can do that to some degree, but it's you want to begin moving away from that as early as you can. Once you're starting to see some patterns in what clients want from you. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much. Have you experienced or have an opinion about ads for agencies to get leads?
I don't have any firsthand experience with it working. I'll say that. I've tried to run tried to run ads for each of the agencies that I've worked in full time, mainly at the prompting of company leadership, and it's just ended up providing bad fit leads. I think the biggest reason that happens is that most oftentimes, I think it works really well in SaaS because you have a tangible product. Like you can go and have a demo. It's like, okay, this is what you're buying. Whereas, and it's also tends to be cheaper price points. So, it's like, oh, this thing is $39 a month or $99 a month. People are more likely to sign up on a whim or sign up for a trial on a whim through paid ads. That's not necessarily the case with agency business. And with an agency, it's much, you might be charging $3,000 or $30,000 or $300,000. And so I don't know, I feel like at least maybe it's around setting the proper expectations. If you're trying to do it as a tactic to get immediate good quality leads, I would say like that's not going to work. I think so. This is where I would test. I think it might be worth running ads if you want to get awareness around. You want your target market to understand maybe what you do and how you're unique. That's more like awareness ads, not necessarily direct response sort of conversion ads. So that's one use case, but it's not going to be as obvious of an ROI. And then, so maybe ads would work for low ticket productized offer, but not for a high ticket custom offer as an agency. Yeah. And, that's a possibility. The other thing that I've heard folks mention, which I haven't tested this yet either, but I think it sounds like it would work, is developing an actual like an info product. I would say course, but course is a lot of work. I mean, probably something that's a little more low lift, that is like, here is my $15 template, and almost try to kind of doing a kind of low, almost like a customer acquisition as a lead generation approach. The main thing you need to do there, though, is make sure that the types of people that would buy that low ticket offer are also the same types of people that would buy your high ticket offer. Because what sometimes happens is that you're attracting two separate audiences. And so it doesn't actually end up working as lead generation for you. So I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that kind of conveys the type of thinking that kind of needs to go into it. Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Any more questions?
If you have questions afterwards, I have my email on the screen there. So feel free to shoot me an email. This is fun.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And also, David is in our Slack community, so you can DM him as well, I think. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Thank
Awesome.
you very much. So probably there are no more questions, that we can wrap up our session. Thank you very much for the great presentation again, David, for taking your time. I highly appreciate that. One thing that you'd like to say
I just hope that this helps more folks with their growth to maybe not focus on the tactical things first, but focus on the really foundational stuff. That's going to make all the difference. And when you do go get to the tactical stuff, it's going to be a lot more effective if you have that really strong foundation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for making time and coming to the event. I hope that was insightful and informative and helpful for you guys. So the recording will be published by the end of the week. Have a good one. Have a nice day. Okay, bye-bye, guys. It's your turn.
Well, first of all, can you see my screen? Just wanna
Yep,
make sure.
we can.
Okay. Well, yeah, probably the easiest thing, I made a little slide about this, but my name is David.